A regular girl in a regular American town, going to a regular American college, suddenly disappears. But there's nothing regular about that disappearance. In fact, the more you dig, the more you realize so much is going on. In fact, is stranger than fiction.
What you are about to hear is believed to be real, based on witness accounts, testimonies, and public record. This is terrifying and true.
In the fall of 1998, the life of a 19-year-old college student took a dark and mysterious turn, leaving behind a void that time and investigation has failed to fill. Despite the passage of more than 2 decades, the story of Amber Wilde's vanishing continues to baffle, sadden, and captivate thousands across the globe. Tonight, we're dedicated to understanding what happened to her and the reasons behind her sudden and unfortunate disappearance. So, get comfortable, and while you're at it, make sure you're subscribed on your favorite podcasting app as we take a deep dive into another terrifying and true story. And it gets interesting. We'll tell that story after these quick words. Amber was a young, responsible girl enrolled in university who randomly disappeared one night from her apartment. Her parents and family have dedicated the past 2 decades to uncovering the truth behind their daughter's disappearance. Just imagine their relentless pursuit, chasing leads, talking to witnesses, and even taking on their own investigative missions. So far, though, the mystery endures and has left them with no solid answers. This particular story has attracted a lot of public attention, and many theories have been put forward that aim to explain what happened to Amber Wilde. Some imagine a kidnapping scenario, while others ponder if she might have fallen victim to a random act of violence. But like I always say, in most true crime stories, there's nothing as simple as black and white. So with that all being said, let's dig even deeper. It all started on September 23rd, 1998, as Amber was heading towards her university to attend classes. She found herself in a car accident, having rear-ended another vehicle. Both parties agreed to exchange information and discuss the matter later that day. Although the collision did not cause much damage, Amber's head had slammed against the windshield, and this resulted in a considerable amount of pain. She immediately went ahead and notified her family about this accident, to which her father recommended that she get herself checked by a doctor. Also worried for her well-being, Amber checked in with the school's medical staff, who suspected a concussion and advised someone to check on her periodically, either in person or via phone calls. Her father, Steve Wilde, maintained a steady line of communication with her throughout the day. Before going to sleep, Amber told him that she was experiencing a throbbing headache and requested that her father call her the following morning to ensure she woke up for her classes on time. However, the next morning, as Steve tried to get in touch with his daughter, even after repeated tries, she did not answer the phone. And when quite a bit of time had passed, he realized that something was wrong. Amber was a very responsible child and maintained close contact with her parents. Therefore, this behavior was both unusual and alarming. Fueled by parental intuition, Steve quickly made his way to Amber's apartment, only to find out that Amber and her car were missing. Upon discovering her absence, Steve promptly contacted the Green Bay police. Explaining the situation, Steve recalled, quote, "When it went 12 hours from our last conversation, I knew something wasn't right. I had a key to her apartment, so I was able to go in there. And nothing was going on in that apartment. Nothing jumped out and said, "This is what happened," or pointed me in a direction as to where she was. Initially, the police suspected that the accident had compromised Amber's mental functions, and she wandered off accidentally. However, as time passed by and she was nowhere to be found, other more sinister possibilities had to be considered. The first clue that could provide answers to her mysterious disappearance was found just a few days after she was gone, when her car was spotted across Lambeau Field, the home turf of the Green Bay Packers. Amber herself was still, however, nowhere to be found. Green Bay police detective David Graff described the puzzling scene. Quote, "Her car was unlocked, the keys were in the ignition, her purse was in the trunk, and her phone was on the front seat, still plugged in." Unfortunately, however, no eyewitnesses saw who had driven the car there. While there could be the possibility that her concussion had triggered amnesia, which had prompted her to wander off, a closer examination of her car revealed something unsettling. The driver's seat, usually adjusted to accommodate her short height, had been moved back, which suggested that someone else had driven the car. Meanwhile, another piece of the puzzle had also emerged. Amber's car had been serviced just 2 days prior, with the odometer reading documented, but when her car was found, it displayed around 900 additional, unaccounted-for miles. At this point, the detectives involved in the case had classified it as a homicide, given the fact that there had been no evidence uncovered which would suggest that she had disappeared on her own. The entire focus was now on finding the answer to one simple question. Who would want to kill Amber, and why? Most of the leads that were used to understand the complexities of this case were taken from her journal, in which she documented everything that had happened in her life. Each entry captured daily minutiae, personal exchanges, and even the most intimate of secrets. The first and most important thing that detectives who studied her diary stumbled upon related to her pregnancy, which was a matter that was also discussed with the family. Amber's aunt, Lori Enner, was among the first to learn of the pregnancy and remarked that Amber initially characterized it as an accident, but had the intention to embrace motherhood. Amber's determination to pursue her pre-med studies at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay and prepare for her impending parenthood was also met with support from all of her family, with one exception: the alleged father of her child, Matt Schneider. According to Lori, Amber confided in Matt about her pregnancy, but he was not very pleased with it and wanted nothing to do with the baby, and even recommended that she get an abortion. Despite his reluctance, Amber reportedly tried to involve him in her pregnancy journey, not wanting to deprive her child of a father figure. In order to investigate her pregnancy experience further, the police reached out to Matt Schneider and conducted interviews with him. However, the outcome of these interviews was quite unexpected, as he flatly denied any sexual involvement with Amber, asserting that he barely knew her and that they had only crossed paths a few times. Schneider's fiancée Heidi further supported his account and even suggested that Amber had a one-sided infatuation with Matt and had fabricated their connection both in her writings as well as to her family. Upon being interviewed by local news agencies in one instance, Heidi said, quote, "I think it was easy for them at first to point a finger at Matt." In response to questions about how the investigation had impacted her family and the accusations against her husband, quote, "We've been married for 20 years. We were high school sweethearts. I'm not a dumb woman. I wouldn't stay with someone if I thought he did that." Further, she added that Matt was unfairly targeted by police and that she hopes Amber Wilde's family finds closure. The case got even more complex, however, as detectives found cell phone records that clearly showed that Amber had communicated extensively with Matt via phone calls. If this was indeed one-sided, why would Matt receive her calls? And if it wasn't one-sided, then why was Matt hiding the truth? And why was his fiancée helping him? Were they guilty of something, or did Matt want to keep his affair from Amber hidden from his fiancée and therefore refuse to admit the relationship? A relationship which Amber had very frequently talked about in her diary. Regardless of the narrative put forward by Heidi and Schneider, one thing is quite clear. The top suspect in this case, according to both the police and Amber's family, was Schneider. So let's have a more detailed discussion about his role in this case. During the early phases of the investigation, all Schneider would tell police was that he had never had sex with Wilde, which was a major red flag, since Amber's perspective, narrated through her diary, was completely different, and the call record stated otherwise as well. Another factor that increased police suspicion was Schneider's lack of cooperation. He had immediately gotten himself a lawyer, and had little personal involvement in the handling of the case. In an attempt to further investigate his involvement, the police even got in touch with a friend of Schneider, named Pettit. Schneider and Pettit worked together as surveyors for a company that was contracted by the State Department of Transportation. Upon being interviewed, Pettit told police that his girlfriend had possibly seen Wilde in her car. He then proceeded to give a detailed description of Amber Wilde's car. Upon further questioning, he also informed the police that Schneider had told him he had gone to see a movie and had dinner by himself after work on September 23, 1998, the night during which Wilde had supposedly disappeared. During another investigation in July of 2014, Pettit told investigators he was not close to Schneider and had only known him a couple of months, and that they did not have a close enough relationship with him that he would want to risk everything to help Schneider out with anything concerning Amber Wilde. And this is where things start to get very fishy, because Schneider's girlfriend, now wife, had testified earlier in December of 1999 at a hearing that Schneider knew Pettit well enough to ask him to be an usher at their wedding. She also reportedly told police in April of 2015 that Schneider and Pettit had known each other well before they worked together in 1998 and continued personal contact in the ensuing years. This was a very clear contradiction to Pettit's claim in July of 2014 that the two had just had 2 conversations in the years following Schneider's wedding in 2000. And once again, cell phone records also gave more clarity to police suspicions, as they indicated that Schneider and Pettit had remained in touch with each other for quite some time. Despite this evidence, no arrests have been made so far, and that of course includes Matthew Schneider. He also has not been charged with anything in connection to Wilde's disappearance. To this date, authorities have not been able to find any trace of the missing girl, even though numerous detailed searches have been conducted in areas including a 30-acre site in rural Portage County in November of 2014, as well as one in the Shawano area. Detectives and police authorities involved in the case do firmly believe that Wilde is dead and that she was murdered. In the words of one official, quote, "With her strong family ties, and she was determined to finish school, and the things she said about her pregnancy, there's just no way she just vanished." However, how she was murdered, when exactly, and by whom, remains a mystery still patiently waiting to be solved. The endurance of this cold case is simply a testament to how much the family of Amber Wilde still care so deeply for their missing child. Well, this is a story that feels like it's going to be relatively cut and dry, and then turns out to not be quite so cut and dry after all. As I was reading about the disappearance of Amber Wilde, I was very surprised by the turn where the potential father of her unborn child claims that they were never dating at all, and that he had a fiance at the time who also does not believe he was philandering, and that Amber Wilde's diary doesn't seem to reference anything about being the other woman, at least as far as we know. This opens up a lot of speculation that really tinkers with the old imagination, which is one of the reasons people like true crime so much, because it makes you imagine, it makes you think critically, and it mortifies you, and being mortified can remind us we're alive. I mean, you're subscribed to Weekly Spooky, so clearly you like a bit of the morbid side of life, and I'm glad to have you here. But I will say, reading these stories week in and week out, I really hope that these families get their closure. It's so heartbreaking not only to lose a family member, not only to have somebody disappear from your life, but to never know why, to never know what happened. I am a person who doesn't believe closure is a very realistic goal, but sometimes you just want to have an answer. Something to run through your mind as you lay your head on your pillow. If anything develops, I'll let you know. Terrifying and True is narrated by Enrique Couto. It's executive produced by Rob Fields, produced by Daniel Wilder, with original theme music by Ray Mattis. If you have a story you'd like us to cover on the program, send us an email at weeklyspooky@gmail.com. And if you want to support us in a very direct way, go to weeklyspooky.com and click on Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can support us and allow us to keep the spooky rolling and rolling and rolling. And I want to say a big thank you to our Patreon podcast booster, folks who pay just a little bit more to hear their names at the end of the show. And they are Johnny Nix, Bobbletopia.com, Megan Hua, Julia Kirsch, Brent McCullough, Steve King, Karen Weemet, Jack Kerr, and Craig Cohen. Thank you all so much, and we'll see you next time right here on Weekly Spooky and Terrifying and True.